Hello, Vegas. How are you all?
Is it on?
Woo. Awesome. I didn't even say the choices. I thought I'll give you 4 choices. The first, good.
How do you know?
Second, better. Third, awesome. And fourth, all of the above.
D.
I had 3 reasons to choose either C or D. First, I'm in Vegas. Second, you are in Vegas. And the third, we all are in Vegas. So now tell me, how are you? Awesome. That makes me comfortable that you're not feeling sleepy. You had good food. All right, so let's start with the business. Let's start with the work for which we all are here for the panel discussion. Formally introducing myself, my name is Neetu Rishi. Forget that introduction. I call myself a passionpreneur because I converted my passion to profession which pays my bills, thankfully. But people call me as startup mentor because I work with young kids. I want them to be a part of such a conference and speak here. My youngest, I guess, is a 6-year-old who published a book and paid all the royalty to charity. Isn't that amazing? Thank you. And I gave myself a goal that I'm going to reach out to 5,000 students till December 2022 and shape up their future. And I'm trying my level best. I know your wishes are with me. Now, introducing my team members, we have Ms. Taruna Ramani. She is the one who has started a movement to level the power of communication for the success that someone truly deserves. She's the founder of Power Speakers Unlimited. A round of applause for her, please. Then on right, we have Mr. Greg Bybee. He's the founder and CEO of Evella, which makes a platform for countable decision-making in education. He's also the founder of Polyscribe and a board member of Leadership High. There are many more things to talk about, but I'll condense it. A round of applause for Mr. Greg. Then on my left, we have Mr. Dennis Johnson. He is a passionpreneur. He mentors young adults in transportation technology. Exciting. I got to get a lot of information from him. A round of applause for him, please. And then last but not the least, we have Mr. Clinton on the extreme, if you see. He is the CEO and founder at Clinton Harris Coaching, best-selling author of many books, but I'll pick only 2, A Collective Breath and Obstacle Equals Opportunities Too. They're all available on Amazon. Feel free to buy them. With that, you did give a round of applause to him. All right, thank you. So I'll take a seat. And let's start with the discussion. The topic for today we have is e-learning for environmental sustainability. Now this takes me back to a little story. I'm a storyteller. It was 13th of March 2020 when I was with my advisory group. We all know that was the time when COVID hit all of us. So my advisory group, few of people said, let's take a break from this work. Some said, let's find an alternative business. Let's keep a hybrid option. How will you teach kids? How will you teach entrepreneurship online? But that reminded me, there is a movie in my native language, I'm from India, in which there's a dialogue which says, people look for opportunities. They work hard to get the opportunities. But I am the one who works hard and leaves no stone unturned when I get the opportunity. And that made me work on it. I remodeled all my curriculum, and here I am. Now I have global audience, I have global kids, and I am in a global conference. All right, so I'll be asking a few questions. I got a chance this morning to get some questions from the audience, which will help us to go in sync with all of you. So I think, Dennis, I have a question for you. Does online learning work for everyone? If yes, how is it different for different learners, different age groups or categories?
So let me answer the first question. Online learning definitely does not work for everyone. My particular career is transportation technology, which means it's a lot of discovery learning and it's hard to transmit that over an online platform only. We do use online platform, but it's something that you actually have to. Initially, I started trying to just do what we did in person and just apply it online, and that was a great failure. So we had to come up with ways to allow students to work online who were tactical. So that meant we would have to send home items for them to actually do the tactical lab exercises while I demonstrated it on a camera, which meant I had to learn how to be a videographer. Everything was live, so that kind of transformed how we did education that way. So it's not for everyone. For those who are self-directed and want to kind of self-pace, it meant that, just like you were saying, all the curriculum had to be restructured, and some were maybe at a lower pace and some would a little higher, so you allowed all the students to kind of work at their pace, but kind of set a bar where you can encourage them to step up. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Very nice, yes. I also believe that because in the crowd, including me, there are few who are old school kind of people who are not very ed tech, right? But at the same time, Greg, I think you can answer this better. How can online learning be better than in person?
Well, I think, Dennis, you said it perfectly, which is you can't just try to translate what's being done in person directly online. I spent actually the first half of my career in education working in online learning. So I was at Coursera and then NovoEd, working with universities to sort of translate courses. And when we started, we put a camera in the back of the room and we recorded it, right? Slides, lecture, sage on the stage style. And we actually used to joke that we did a great job of replicating in-person learning, and we had pictures of audiences falling asleep in large lecture halls. And what we realized is, like, actually what makes for good learning is kind of the hands-on, experiential, constructivist, like you're really getting into it. And so we've got to think about, well, how can online be different than in person? And I think that's where you can actually find there's actually some places where online can be better. For instance, one of the programs we built was, we did a lot of business programs, online MBAs, executive degrees. I think a lot of that type of training can be better online because you're able to spread it out over a longer period of time and be able to practice the skills you're learning in the real world. So like I did my MBA and I remember learning how to give feedback, or actually the hardest thing was like learning how to fire someone, very difficult thing. And I sat in the lecture hall and even in the small workshops where we rehearsed it and we role played and I was like, okay, I got it. I learned the rules, I passed the test, I aced it, okay, I'm ready. A few years later in the real world, I have to try this. And it's just so much harder. And I really wish I could have gone back to my business school professor and been like, wait a minute, that's not how it works. It's not that easy. I want to ask some questions. I want to push back. I want to challenge. What you can do in an online environment is these MBAs now get spread over 4 or 5 years, and you do it while you're working. And so you're actually able to try the things you're learning in the classroom, in the virtual classroom, in the real world, and then come back to the class and say, hey, I've got some questions, this didn't work. And you actually make it a lot more kind of personalized and applied. And so that's just one example, but I look for ways that you can leverage the fact that you can do the work from anywhere, and you can do it while you're working, and find out how that can actually make the learning more effective by making it more applied.
Right. More challenging for the educators, I guess. But I'm sure, Clinton, you have a lot of experience with, because you also converted all the things to online. What's your perspective towards this?
Online learning, of course, is not meant for everyone, as stated before. I work with a school right now. I correspond with a lot of schools, but namely one called REMCAD, Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And through them, I've learned that, it is possible to integrate and combine, not just in a hybrid format, but combine a student learning atmosphere, so to speak. So the ground students there actually are required to spend time with online students and vice versa. So everyone has that overall experience of being there, learning there, and interacting with one another so they actually get that full experience. With that being said, it is shown me that this can be something that we can go ahead and spread across many avenues of learning, not just in schools, through didactic work, but also to help gain that experience that people are seeking or students are seeking, to go ahead and get that relevant experience in their work experience, in their life experience as well.
I think yes, because of COVID, this e-learning took a front seat. Now, that gives rise to another question that should schools promote e-learning too, even after COVID? And if yes, to what extent? I think you would like to answer this.
It's something we've been discussing in our region, the Southern California, all of California, other states, and we've all kind of looked at, okay, August is coming, and yes, we're going to continue on with e-learning. Many parents, I heard in a session earlier today, they're not going to want to send their kids back to school in the traditional format. However, there's a lot of benefits from online learning to go along with the challenges. So one of the things we're looking at doing is having students do certain parts of their practical application at home or from the beach, as some of my students were. They had the camera on. I can see them. They would go have their fun and do their theory portions in a natural environment, and then they would come on campus. And that's where we kind of adopted the hybrid portion and do their tactical lab operations that way. But yeah, definitely moving forward. I don't see it. We always say we're going back to the old way, but I think it's going to be a new normal, and the new normal will be quite a bit mixed with what we used to do, combined with what we had to do March 13th, 2020, when COVID kind of just slammed us all in the face as educators. So,
yeah. And this reminds me, when this online platform started and one of my students had a virtual background of a beach, I said, how come I went to a beach and there wasn't good Wi-Fi? How are you able to take a class? Ms. Neetu, this is a virtual background. I said, okay, thankfully. So we learned from kids. But this was about school. When we talk about the universities, because they have that traditional, settings laid out from years, continued. So will they be also disrupted? Clinton, what do you think about that?
I don't think traditional schools will be disruptive. Actually, I think it'll help them grow. With that being said, online is actually the fastest growing method or mode of school in today's world. It does not take away from the schools. It actually adds another facet to their capability of growing students in another way. Are there negatives to it? Absolutely. Are there positives? There may be more positives than negatives in the sense that individuals can have an asynchronous learning format where they can go to school anytime, day or night they choose to, and still earn that degree, still keep their life, and still be able to move forward. So universities won't be disrupted. They'll actually use that as a tool to move forward and grow, in my opinion.
Greg, you are also working with universities. So what are your take on this context? Will the universities, the traditional method, be disrupted?
I think, well, it's interesting, the idea of like traditional method, I think a lot of folks, myself included, when we think of university, we think of the traditional four-year residential experience, but that's actually not the normal experience for most people in our country. I think what's going to happen is schools have to differentiate and have to specialize. And the people who are going to be the most disrupted are some of the community colleges where their primary competitive advantage was location, right? They were, there's one in each community, it's nearby, it's affordable. What's going to happen is every university is now nearby, because I think most universities will have an online component that you can do, and those online components in many cases are quite affordable. So it's going to create some competition where you've got to actually differentiate on outcomes, and you're going to start to see employers in a community, and they're going to judge, like, do graduates from that school, how do they compare to graduates who did their degree online? So I think this is going to be a great thing, because it's finally going to create a lot of competition for schools that haven't typically had it.
Right.
Now, for the long, the sort of elite schools, the residential four-year schools with campuses and football programs and athletics, I think they're going to be just fine. They'll have to innovate on the edges. They'll find new ways, and they've already done it. I'm actually very impressed at how quickly schools have moved to online. They all started with like a class, like a MOOC, and then they dabbled with certificate programs, and now they're moving into full online degrees. And so I think this is going to be more of a hybrid model where you're going to see both, and people will choose whatever's best for them.
I guess yes, because when I started this online learning, I thought I'm the pioneer, but then I saw, oh, everybody is doing that. Means it's not only me who came out of the comfort zone. It is definitely, but Everybody is doing that, and now that is with ease. But I think circumstances also make a difference. So this directs me to Taruna. That sorry, do you think that there are circumstances where online learning is not appropriate, or maybe to simplify my question, when is in-person a better option or online a better option? What are your thoughts on that?
See, I honestly feel that up until COVID, we were not even thinking about this. We were not thinking that there was an alternate method of teaching. And then COVID happened. And up until then, I was not thinking about it either. But now I realize that this has opened opportunities for so many children or so many learners who wanted to do things, but it was not accessible to them. So online learning has opened it for them. But if you were to ask me in what circumstances is online learning not appropriate, before COVID, I would have given you a list of, areas where online learning could not work, but so many areas we are making it work now. So there is a way, not just a way out, there is a way to go about things is what I strongly feel. And I also feel that student engagement is super important, whether you're doing it in class or you are doing it online. If you are able to engage your students, if you are able to create that curiosity in them and that the sense of engagement, learning will happen. So certain fields like STEM fields might not be traditionally okay for online learning, but again, there are so many robotic groups that I know of who've done phenomenally well during COVID. The technology that we have today has made it possible, and I'm thinking that it's the way forward. I mean, if we are resisting it, we should not, because it's the way forward. I mean, during COVID, yes, but post-COVID also. A speaker in the morning, he said this, he said that if it has disrupted our traditional method of teaching, and if post-COVID we want to go back to the same method, I think we are making a mistake. We should evolve our methods of teaching and then go forward is what I think. What do you think about this, Clinton?
I don't believe education will continue to grow if we don't accept the changes. The only constant in the universe is change.
Yeah.
And we have to adapt constantly to whatever we're faced with. COVID is just, unfortunately, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately another hurdle we have to overcome, and not just the educational facet, but the world as a whole. But the educational realm, it did take a hit, and we've taken them many times before from, other, areas of opportunity where we can, rise like a phoenix. I don't want to call it that, so please don't, use those words as a negative. But in this case, it is something that ended up having a silver lining. Education is going to grow out of it and grow in different directions that we never even thought possible, because we never had the need for education to grow in those directions.
I think those boundaries are broken now is what I'm thinking. Like as you said, you have global students. Power Speakers Unlimited has global students, because now two things. Social media is a big thing. It promotes you, and then people outside of your area are seeing it and they want to do it. If they want to do it, earlier we would have had to say no, it's not possible because we only do in-person teaching, but now that's not the case. But having said that, there are challenges that we as educators face when we're doing online, especially with younger kids. And to me, the solution is to engage the students, period, and to give personalized attention. So when we had to restructure everything at Power Speakers Unlimited, I sat down with my teachers and I told them, nothing changes in terms of your interaction with the student. Each and every child sitting on that Zoom meeting should feel like he or she is connected with you. If we miss that link, then we are not able to achieve what we want to. So that makes our job as educators, it brings more responsibility to our job as educators versus when we were doing in person is what I think.
Right. No, completely I agree. I think now this takes me back again to what Robert said in the morning, that are we mad enough? I think yes, we all are mad enough because we educators are ready now to take on the role with anything that comes our way. But that is taken care of. The next thing that the question comes to our mind is about the subject matter, about the content. So I think that this takes me to this question that how subject matter affects online learning versus in-person or hybrid learning. So I would want Dennis to answer that.
Okay, well, I'm going to kind of piggyback on the last thing that one of our goals is if a student doesn't know you care, you can't get them to change. Once they know you care, then they can take a bite of what you're trying to feed them. And then once they try, they can actually learn. So I like to actually show when I make mistakes and show how am I going to get out of that mistake real time so they can learn that, hey, when you're doing something that's an engineering product, you're not going to always do it right the first time, and that's part of it. We teach passing, which means I should always get the right answer, and that's not how real life is. So to the question, the subject matter does make a difference. If you're teaching what we call in the K through 12, like a core academic course, sometimes there's a lot of modules that are already available online. You just kind of feed it to the student through Google Classroom and they go off and go. When you have something that's more of a STEM related subject where there's going to be some equipment or some tactical skills that need to be derived from doing an experiment, it's a little more of a challenge to just put it online. That's what I discovered. Just try to put it online, it didn't work. So trying to take a tactical course and do it online requires that you have to get some of those safe equipments to the student, which means you got to get parents involved and the school involved to actually pick up some of these supplies to do it. So that makes it a little bit more of a challenge, but it also makes it exciting when you can see someone learn and practice and do things that maybe they've never would have tried before because it's in their comfortable environment. And I give them the thing of, hey, it's due by midnight. Just like at a college when it's online, it's due at 11:59. You've got all day. You're going to learn how to plan your life and do the work when it's needed. Now, it makes my day longer, but it also, if I can get them to learn, it's worth it. So yeah, it does add a little bit to it, but everything can't be done online. But we can accommodate and modify in order to make it work.
Yeah, again, this takes me back last summer when we had just started our summer camps, which was online. One of the parents, after asking all the questions, she asked me, how are the children adapting to your teaching methodology? She meant to ask, are they able to adapt with the online? And I said, we don't want them to adapt. It's we who will adapt with their learning methodology. And she said, wow, that makes sense, right? So definitely it is. We have to, again, mold ourselves. But I think we have done a good job on that. And I've seen people doing great jobs since I've been talking since morning to people. But Tarun, another follow-up. Sorry about that.
I was just on that because I thought you and Dennis both made this point about kind of this personal connection side. And it's funny because I think initially we were concerned, so I'm also on the board of a high school, and we were very concerned about that personal touch with the scholars because it's very important that they know we care and that we have a very small school where that relationship's important. And it was challenging at first, but actually what we found is that online presents an opportunity to connect on a different level. It took a lot of practice, but for instance, you start to get to know people's families. Some people have kids, or their siblings, or their pets. Their pets come, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I started saying, "No, this is my favorite part of COVID is I get to meet your kids and your pets and your family." And also, I think it helped flip the role, right? So teaching learning is as much about teaching and vice versa. And with a lot of our teachers, this was very challenging for them to adapt to the Zoom environment. It's a completely new pedagogy, a new tool, very digitally advanced for some folks. And so the students started teaching the teachers and helping them set up a virtual background or how to do this thing. And that created a new bond between the teachers and the students that we were all shocked that at the end of it, some of the relationships are stronger than they were even in person.
It is. And as you said, bringing the families together in some of my classes, when the parents used to tell me that when I asked my child, how was the class? Earlier they said, it was good, but now I sit with my child, I try not to be in front of the camera. I said, okay, you are taking my classes. So, but it feels good, right? They're connected. All right, thank you for sharing that, Greg. So my question was from Taruna that if online learning is the only option, imagine, then how can you make it effective, especially for the young children? The elder ones, I know they are self-motivated, we can make them sit, but for the younger, especially for the moms, it is so difficult. How do they work?
So it's a very interesting question, but because up until now, online programs were available for high schoolers and then graduates, undergrads, grads. So now because of COVID, we had to introduce it to very young kids. Power Speakers Unlimited has kids as young as 5-year-olds. And to switch to online learning was a challenge. But as teachers, as educators, we have to understand, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to teach, or are we trying for these kids to learn? So if the focus is on me teaching, then it becomes a challenge. For if we understand that we want them to learn, we want them to absorb. So with that mindset, there are quite a few things that we were able to do. One was class size. What is the class size that we want to keep? Because we are not a school classroom, we had a choice of how we wanted to do it. So one was the number of students in a class, one thing. Second thing, the medium that we were using was Zoom. I played around with a few of those apps, and then I wanted to see where we could get the max engagement from students. Zoom has great things like breakout rooms. I could personally send message, and I can personally send messages to students to say, hey, you are doing very good. Or when we are engaging them, like, all right, each and every one of you, type your answer in the chat. So they are engaged. They are doing it as we are speaking. Raise your hands. All those emojis, they are fancy, because if one kid is talking, seriously, there are these kids who will be sending those heart messages and, the smiling messages, and then the funny emoticons there. And, some emoticons with, the laughing emoticon is there, and the clapping, ding, 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 ding. So the little kids, they love playing with that, and I'm like, all right, great engagement from everyone. And the moment I say it, everyone who was on snooze wants to do it too. So I have lots of hearts and claps and, you got it, those kind of things happening, and they are engaged. So the bottom line is to engage them. Now, the other thing, as I said previously, was I spoke to the teachers, our teachers, and I told them that your role is bigger than before. You have to make sure that you are engaging each and every child. When we are doing sessions, we very consciously take names. Like, hey, John, what do you think about it? Because what Kevin did was, did you like what Kevin did? Because I see that Joe liked it and Joe gave a heart. So actually we are very consciously involving all the kids when we are in a session. That is another thing that we are doing. With younger kids, we are able to do creative drama online. That's such a cool thing that we are doing with young kids. We involve them in creative drama in Zoom sessions, performing arts on Zoom. Seriously, I would never have thought about this, and I would say, no, this cannot happen on Zoom. But it's happening, and the kids at the end of the class were like, hey, can we please do creative drama again? And I'm like, this is working. This is working. So we've all had to get creative, and we've come up, I think not just me, each one of us has come up with our own ways of cracking the monster, which is e-learning, and come up with solutions. And there are solutions that are working. We had to try, it was hit and try. Earlier it was like, this is not working, that is not working. But now, after this long, we know what's working, and very proud to say the kids are happy, engaged, and the learning is going good.
And how about the dress code? Because on the top, they are informals. Because in my classes, when I teach entrepreneurship, they have to dress like an entrepreneur. So they're wearing all those jackets and blazers. And once I told them, okay, let's all stand up, because I thought people were feeling sleepy. And one child sends me in the chat, I'm in my PJs. I cannot. So I'm sure, and we all must be doing the same things, all right? Okay, so we are going on a good pace with the discussion. We talked about pros and cons, the hybrid or in-person, how is it going to be post-COVID. But there's one more thing which needs to be addressed is the digital side of it. And the person right next to me is well versed with the digital thing. So I have a question for you. What impact does online learning have on the digital divide, I would say?
Oh yeah, this is
Is it a tough question?
it's a very important question. You know, I'm very optimistic about it though. So I mean, probably obvious, but the concern of course is that access to high-speed internet or even internet at all is still not where it needs to be. You know, about 10 to 15% of the country doesn't have high-speed internet, and up to 5% has no internet at some times. And so the fear, of course, is that as things move online, those that have access to the technology and the internet are going to be able to, you know, learn better, and you know, the divide will grow. But I'm fairly optimistic because in the past few years, internet access has dramatically grown in the country, and there's organizations like Education Superhighway that have really invested in getting high-speed internet to every school in the country. And philanthropy really came to the rescue in COVID. And in our high school, a lot of the scholars didn't have access to high-speed internet at home. And we were able to get a grant to deliver, what do you call them, little hotspots to all the kids. And the school actually set up, or actually the school district set up buses and parks around town with high-speed internet. And this has dramatically increased access in our city, and it's really happening around the country. And devices as well has been another kind of issue, but the access to mobile phones is dramatically helping that. In fact, it's interesting, a lot of kids are doing their homework on a phone, and so teachers are becoming kind of aware of this and designing exercises and activities so that they can be done from a mobile phone, and access to those are much more available. You know, the thing is though, it's not just access to devices though and internet, and this we learned during COVID, is some of it's also access to room and space, sanity, like a quiet place to take the calls. A lot of our scholars live in homes that have maybe 2, 3, 4 families together, 16 people in a 4-bedroom house. This is San Francisco, so it's very expensive. And so actually internet access wasn't the challenge, it was just having a room to be on Zoom without a lot going on in the background, like giving them the ability to focus. And I mean, I'm personally finding this for working from home as well, that actually being able to go to a location that is purpose-built for learning or working is actually a blessing. And there's another piece that's, I think, a part here is we forget sometimes, although we were very much reminded during COVID, that school plays an important role around essentially like daycare. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a very important role of schools. I think our country should provide free daycare at all ages. And so this is sort of the best that we do right now. And when that was taken away from families, a lot of parents really struggled with that today. They had to work and their kids were at home and trying to learn. So I think there's still a lot of work to do there, but I'm very optimistic that access to at least the first 2 devices and internet is getting a lot better. And then the other piece I would say is sort of accessibility, right? So it's not just socioeconomic status, it's also learning styles, learning disabilities, and I think that's been really challenging, but there's been a lot of push in the past 4 or 5 years around accessibility. Web standards have gotten a lot easier. All of the modern learning platforms and LMS platforms now are sort of accessible out of the box.
Right.
So yeah, I'm very optimistic.
I think it's not only from the learner side, but last week I was in San Jose for a conference, and there I met a professor. He should be around 65 years, and he said, last semester I didn't take any classes because I don't opt online. I didn't take classes. But this year, if you don't open up the in-person classes, how will I pay my bills? And I kept on thinking, yes, there are people who might not be ready. That, okay, I don't want to go into all that. But I think that is the only solution that we have. We have to go with the pace. We all are not only survivors, fighters, we are achievers, right? So I think that was the things, but I wanted to ask my team, are we missing on anything which we need to address more? Else we can open a small session for questions from the audience. Did I miss anything that we wanted to share? You're
No,
good?
I think we're good.
No,
All right, so we can open some time for questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions, we would love to have questions. So please raise your hands, or you can just stand up and the person will assist you with the mic. All right, so we have a lady towards my left in white.
I'm just especially interested in the young people, the younger crowd learning on e-platforms, and especially like those learning to read. There's a lot of information about the need to touch things. How did you support sensory-based learning through your e-learning experiences? And did you use YouTubes and create videos? Also, I'm curious about that.
Okay.
So this is, thank you for the question, because we had to really sit and hack this in our head first of how we want to do. So what we did was a couple of things. One, we would ask them to draw. So they would draw. Now again, the way we work is, and even when we were doing in-person programs, we don't want to control the child. That we are very clear about. So, and we told parents very clearly, this is not a drawing class. My purpose is not to teach your child drawing. My purpose is to bring that joy into creative expression, period. If your child is speaking and if your child is drawing as speaking, then what's happening is that joy is there and your child is able to express himself through two different ways. One is through speaking, the other is through drawing, and the child is very happy. The child is happy creating, happy sharing. But again, it was not a drawing class. It is not a drawing class. So it's about self-expression. That is what we are aiming at. So self-expression through creative drama, creative drawing, creative speaking. So we used all those three mediums to teach what we wanted to teach. So the methods changed, but trust me, the goal remained the same, and we are able to achieve what we want to in these children. Sure?
Right.
Hi. My question is kind of a statement slash question. So I wanted to kind of start with the galactic aspect of it, and then I'll bring it back into Earth. I'm a Trekkie. I love Star Trek. There was a movie, I can't remember, it had to at least been a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago. And the pandemic brought this memory back to me because I never understood what I was looking at until this pandemic struck. And it would be Spock. As a child, he was in school. He needed to be called out of class for someone needing him, maybe his father. Now, they went to go get him, and they walked into a setting kind of like the lunch area, all these circles, but you walk down into these pods, and that's where the child was interacting with his holographic teacher. And I thought to myself 15 years ago, what would make something like this happen? And then, of course, this pandemic struck. And I know that art equals, it has to come from somewhere. So wherever these ideas have been stirring up in people's minds through the artistic value and their thoughts, and you know, they made films out of it, these futuristic thoughts, they're on point, because clearly when you have issues with children, you have to figure out how to interact with them. I have been in education for about 40 plus years. I know I don't look it, thank you very much. Now, these children that I have been interacting with, because I'm a dance person and I'm a movement specialist, are across the board ADD and on the scale in every direction you can imagine. I myself am an ADD person growing up and still am now. But I understand as an adult how to focus it in. And I'm working with children on how to focus their energies into forward thinking and learning. I worked in a cyber charter school, which happened on site. People were just like this in a classroom, and every child had their computer, And to keep the children on point was very difficult. When the pandemic struck, I felt so horrible for their parents. I understood what they were just about to go through. The struggle is real. And you have been facing each and every one of these values, and I appreciate this higher than high. I believe in everything that this conference is bringing about, and I'm so happy to have everyone's input, because this is how we get forward to reaching the children in that place where they need to be met. Not every child is the same. No, everyone cannot learn online the same way. Someone brought up earlier that they have a holographic thing that they're going to be working on, and I was like, hey, look at that, here we go again with the Star Trek reference. So schools will have to go in a direction this way, because you got to think about safety, you have to think about individuality, you have to think about how this child needs to interact with society. They need that, not just hand holding or a wraparound. They need to have an absolute interaction with someone that can address what is happening in that moment right then and there. I know that wasn't even really a question, but I just needed to let you all know that what you are doing and what you are saying resonates very highly with me and everything that I have been addressing all of these years, and I could not be happier to be here to hear you address each and every one of these issues, because as a humanitarian, this is absolutely what needs to happen to grow people, period. And I thank you.
Thank you so much. So with that, we'll come to the vote of thanks. I would like to thank GFEL, our whole panel, for creating this platform. Thanks to the lovely audience for not only being active listeners, but participation as well. And thanks Greg, Dennis, Clinton, and Taruna for being with me today. And we are here for 3 days. Let's connect and make it more insightful for each one of us. Thank you.
Thank you.